You don't need to speak to control the room. You only need to exist in a way that interrupts its rhythm. You walk in, not fast, not loud, not dramatic, but the atmosphere changes. People pose, conversations soften, postures adjust, and no one can explain why. It's not charisma, it's not looks, it's not rank, it's presence. Most people enter a space and unconsciously sync to its speed, its tone, its energy. But presence doesn't sync. Présence disturbe. It bends the environment without asking for permission. Because presence is not what you project. It's what you withhold. You don't chase attention. You deny access. You don't overtake the air. You reshape its density. And the moment you stop leaking energy, you start generating gravity. That gravity is what makes people look your way without knowing why. It's what makes your silence louder than their small talk. This isn't about pretending to be important. It's about removing the behaviors that keep you invisible. You don't need volume. You need weight. Because in every room, someone sets the rhythm. And if you don't decide who that is, you'll start dancing to a beat you were never meant to follow. Let's begin. Presence isn't charm. It isn't posture. It isn't how you look or what you say. It's the invisible structure. People feel the moment you enter. Before they know your name, before you speak a single word. It's not energy you give. It's energy you withhold. Most people leak presence. They smile too quickly, speak too soon, try to be liked, understood, received. Presence doesn't chase perception. It doesn't seek entry. It creates gravity, and gravity pulls focus without asking for attention. There are three elements that define true presence. Stillness. You don't rush. You don't shift. You don't explain with your body. When you're still, people project more onto you. Their uncertainty grows, and in that uncertainty, you become the anchor. Density. You don't scatter your attention. You arrive with your awareness whole, not multitasking, not apologizing, fully here. That mental density creates pressure. Others sense it, and without knowing it, they adjust. Sovereignty. You don't mirror the room. You don't soften to match the mood. You hold your own frequency, whether it's welcomed or not. That resistance doesn't make you distant. It makes you dominant. Presence overrides language because it communicates before words. It tells the room, this energy doesn't adapt. You do. People think they're responding to how you speak, but most of the time, they're responding to how you are. When your presence is calibrated, you don't need the first word. You already set the tone of how everything that follows will be received. Think about the quietest person in a meeting. They didn't speak, but the moment they shifted in their chair, everyone noticed. That's not charisma. That's structural presence. Next, we break down how most environments steal your gravity before you even realize it. Most people don't lose presence because they're weak. They lose it because they sink. You walk into a room and without thinking, you match its energy. If it's loud, you raise your voice. If it's fast, you start speeding up. If people are scattered, you begin fidgeting. That's not adaptation. That's erosion. The nervous system wants safety, and safety often looks like belonging. So you blend. But presence doesn't blend. It breaks rhythm. Every time you adjust your tone, your timing, your posture, just to avoid friction, you're lowering your signal. And over time, the room forgets you're there. Not because you said nothing, but because you gave them nothing to align to. You became background. Example, you walk into a meeting. You plan to listen, to hold frame. But the moment the room speeds up, you start nodding faster, smiling wider, jumping in to contribute. Now you're in the tempo, and that tempo is not yours. Another example, you're with friends. You've grown. You think differently. You've outgrown the jokes, the gossip, the fake humility, but you laugh anyway. Not because you agree, but because silence would feel too exposed. But when they joke, when they tease, you laugh too loud. You act like the old you. Not because you're fake, but because the environment is coded to pull you back in. And you didn't resist. You synchronized. This is the dilution trap. Presence requires resistance, not aggression, just refusal to dissolve. You must choose stillness when speed surrounds you. You must choose depth when conversation stays shallow. You must choose quiet when noise feels easier. That choice makes people uncomfortable, but it also makes you unforgettable, because the room will remember who didn't fold, who didn't match, who walked in and brought a new rhythm with them. Next, you'll learn how to do exactly that, on purpose, every time, without a word. Walk slower than the room. Pause longer than expected. Move less than necessary. This is how you inject presence, not by adding anything, but by removing urgency, removing access, removing predictability. Step 1. Enter slow. Not hesitant, not unsure, just unbothered. The room is fast. You move like you're not affected by its clock. Step 2. Vertical stillness. Stand straight, shoulders relaxed, chin level, no unnecessary shifting. Stillness becomes pressure in spaces that expect movement. Step 3. Selective scanning. Don't search for eye contact. Don't seek approval. Look with purpose. Rest your gaze for 3 seconds. Then move on. You train the room to notice when you choose to notice. Step 4. Signal delay. Someone asks a question. You wait 2 seconds before responding. Let silence create gravity. Then speak calm, brief, final. No urgency, no enthusiasm, no performance. The moment you control pace, you control perception. And once you control perception, you control rhythm. They adjust. They lower their voice. They shorten their words. They recalibrate their presence to not disrupt yours. And you haven't said anything yet. You didn't overpower the space. You replaced the rhythm without force. People interpret slowness as confidence because only the insecure rush to be heard. Only the uncertain overcompensate with speed. Most people enter a room and disappear. You enter and the air tightens, not from tension, but from direction. This is presence injection, and it begins before you say a word. Next, you'll learn how to hold that weight, even when the room tries to shake it off. Once your presence shifts the room, it will be tested. Jokes, interruptions, sudden energy spikes, attempts to pull you into comfort zones you no longer fit. People don't challenge your words. They challenge your stillness, not because you're wrong, but because your control reminds them of their lack of it. You don't resist by reacting. You resist by holding. Non-response. When someone tries to cut your rhythm with humor, you don't laugh if it's not real. You don't comment just to stay connected. You let the moment pass, unclaimed. Tone reduction. When they raise pressure, you lower volume. They speak faster, you speak slower. Not to win, to stabilize. You become the reference point for calm, for power, for structure, language minimalism. You say less. You strip caliphate. You don't explain decision. You don't soften lines. I disagree. No, that doesn't work for me. Number, short, sharp, solid. Stillness under pressure isn't absence of emotion. It's refusal to leak it. The room will test your edge to find where you crack. You don't crack. You don't bend. You simply don't shift. Eventually, they stop testing. They start referencing. You've become the frame, not through force, through consistency. The room moves around you because it can't move through you. Next, you'll learn how to extend this atmosphere to shape interaction itself without a single command. Control doesn't require leadership. It requires gravity. You don't have to guide people. You only have to become the point they unconsciously orbit. Ambient influence works because it doesn't trigger resistance. It doesn't look like control. It feels like orientation. 3 techniques anchor this effect. Micro-signals. You nod on see no more. You shift your gaze precisely, not repeatedly. You tilt your head slightly. When someone finishes a sentence, tiny gestures become direction. They signal permission, approval, recalibration. People don't notice they're responding. They just do. Silence framing. You pause before you speak. 3 seconds. Then you talk. Now your words arrive with weight, because the silence made them expensive. You pause after you speak, not for approval, but to let your sentence land. The silence around your words builds their frame. Unspoken authority. You never interrupt. You never fight for space. But when you speak, the room leans in. Not because you raised your voice, but because they've been trained to expect clarity when you open your mouth. That clarity didn't come from performance. It came from stillness, from rhythm, from the quiet pattern. You repeated without noise. Now people ask before they speak. Now they glance before they joke. Now they shift when you enter, not because you asked, because the atmosphere is watching. Your presence isn't power, it's gravity. They move to stay aligned with it. And once that alignment is unconscious, you don't lead, you anchor. Next, you seal the system, not with words, but with absence. Absence of permission, absence of performance, absence of apology. Not performance. They won't follow you because you said something powerful. They'll follow because you didn't flinch. When the room tried to pull you in, that's the difference. Performers speak to be seen. Anchors move less and get noticed more. You didn't interrupt. You arrived. You didn't speak over. You created space. You didn't dominate. You shifted gravity. And now they choose their words more carefully. Not out of fear, out of calibration. They begin reacting to the way you breathe. Pause, wait. Presence is no longer something you try to project. It's the default tone of how you exist. You're not performing seriousness. You're holding weight. You're not faking composure. You're withdrawing access. That's why they adjust. Not because they're told, but because your stillness leaves no space for K's to stick. 24-hour challenge. Don't enter to be noticed. Enter slower. Look less. Speak later. Pause longer. Let the room wander. Let it reshape. Let it shift. Not because you demanded it, but because the rhythm changed. When you walked in, you won't need to prove control, because when your presence is real, the air gets quieter, the tension thickens, and attention begins to organize around you without being asked. That's not aura, that's structure. You didn't raise your voice. You rewrote the rhythm.